Okay, I think we're ready to rock. So we're going to rock. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and this is The Green Rush, the business of cannabis, live on the Pro Cannabis Media social media networks. I'm joined every Friday afternoon at this time by David Rabinovitz from CanAdventure and from MassCan. There's David waving to everybody. That's nice. And I'm so happy to be joined right off the top by Michael Correia, who is the lead lobbyist, I guess. Is that okay to call you the lead lobbyist as opposed to the director of government relations for the NCIA?
You can call me whatever you want, but lead lobbyist works.
Okay, lead lobbyist. So in your lead lobbyist world, you had a very cool meeting a week ago today with the majority leader of the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer from New York. How cool was that meeting, and what was the atmosphere in it?
So one, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday, they had done a press release, and they had sent a press release, and it was Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and Ron Wyden had sent a press release to say, hey, they were working together, or thinking about doing some comprehensive legislation. And we had been hearing that from some offices. And then it came out that, hey, they were going to be doing a Zoom call. Would I like to be part of it? And it was great because for the most part, there were about 25 people on, and it was mostly on the criminal justice, social justice aspect, the Marijuana Justice Coalition. A lot of the people who are working, we were on there representing the industry, but there's only, I think, one other industry. It was really about.
They think the best shot of getting a cannabis reform bill through Congress has to be, you have to lead with social justice. Is that accurate, you think?
So one, that's exactly what Chuck Schumer said. He said this word twice. And that was forget about it if it's just a cannabis legalization bill. He said it twice. I quoted it. I wrote it down. And that if this is not just a clean descheduling bill, this has to address the criminal justice aspect of it to right some of these wrongs that have happened over the past 50 plus years. And so they understand that, and that's going to be an important issue, an important driver. This is not just and you saw this during December when the House was voting on the MORE Act, right. And that was they never viewed it as a cannabis legalization bill. They viewed it as a criminal justice reform bill, and cannabis legalization is part of the bigger picture of all the things they need to address. And Senator Schumer was reiterating the importance that has on this.
David, you got something? I bet you do.
No. I'm listening. I'm fascinated by this because this is something I didn't catch during my reading this week.
It's led a lot of the cannabis media newsletters that have been out there. As I was telling Michael before we went on, every time I opened up another newsletter, Michael Correia from the NCIA said, or Morgan Fox got some equal time too this week too, which I thought was nice. So it doesn't surprise me that this is what's going on, because I remember when I read Bruce Barcott's book, Weed the People, the editor from Leafly, and how on the double date that he had with his friend, they explained to him that this wasn't a drug issue anymore. This truly was a civil rights issue.
Yeah.
And I think that has stuck with me. And of course, as I continue to follow and listen to all the goings on the floor in Washington, D.C. and what you're up against, I'm guessing this is what politics is all about. I've always tried to avoid politics as much as possible in my life. Now I'm right in the middle of it. And now I'm involved with an industry that it seems like the cannabis plant has really become almost like the number one issue in politics. It's tied to so many things. It's tied to banking. It's tied to civil rights. It's tied to drug enforcement, law enforcement. I'm guessing
taxation, revenue, so many things that it touches.
Right. And again, that's another reason why we do what we do, because it is a fascinating time to be talking about this subject. From your perspective, you know how divisive the Senate is along party lines. How do you structure your strategy when it comes to perhaps swaying some of the Republicans to come over to the side, or at least appeal to their populace of how popular this is and why they should be supporting whether it is social justice or descheduling. How do you go about your strategy there? How do you pick?
A couple things, and you mentioned politics and the old adage about not watching the sausage being made, and what goes on in DC is a lot of sausage making. And I'll be honest with you, all I know is politics. I was a political science major. I got out of college. I've been working in politics. That's my whole existence. Like my reality is not based in the real world of business and running businesses like a lot of you guys. And I understand politics. And you mentioned cannabis. Like you could sort of break it into three components. There's the decriminalization aspect. Just stop arresting people. Okay, that's one section. You see a lot of states going forward to that. Then there is the tax regulate component. Like, what are we doing to have a regulated industry to get the illicit market coming out, tax it, regulate it, and go from there? But the final thing is, how do we address all the wrongs that have happened over the past 50 years? And that's all tied in sort of along the spectrum. Yeah, it's easy. Just stop arresting people. They could, do that tomorrow. And that's a big thing. But the other thing is think about how many people's lives were ruined over these past 50 years because of this. And now someone gets to jump in and make a bunch of money off this. So you just can't look at it as one section over the other. You have to look at it holistically. So that's one thing. And the other thing I look at, I tend to be a realist, and it's not what Michael Correia wants. It's not what NCIA wants. What matters is, I'm going to point this way because that's where the Capitol is, 2 blocks from us, even though it's behind a barbed wire fence, which really frustrates me, is what the Capitol, what can we get 218 representatives to agree on, 60 senators to agree on, and get on the president's desk and sign? And, the House Democrats are a lot further along and more progressive on this issue than moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans, and the Republican Party, especially senators. And so, Chuck Schumer said, and Senator Schumer, I don't know him personally, so I'm not going to call him Chuck Schumer. Senator Schumer said, this is going to be a priority. This is something they want to do. They know where elections go. They know there's an election in 2 years, and they know that their time leading DC could be 2 years. So they're looking at that as a window, and it's going to be a priority. And he said, once we get the votes, we're going to do this and we're going to do it right. But with that being said, you do need 60 senators to get something done like this. Well, is someone like a Joe Manchin, he's a Democrat from West Virginia, is he going to be okay with something like this? They only have 50 Democrats. You lose 1 or 2 Democrats, now you need a dozen Republicans. Mm-hmm. And so are a dozen Republicans going to be there? And if they are there, how far along are they going to be? And when I mentioned that whole decriminalize versus tax regulate versus addressing it, like where are they on that spectrum? Because maybe you could decriminalize cannabis now across America. Maybe you could deschedule cannabis now. But is there the 60 votes to address a lot of the harms that have caused and get to a place where Senator Booker is and Senator Schumer is and a lot of the American public is? Right. But our policymakers, especially Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats, are they there? That's what I'm here to figure out, and that's what I'm trying to do to see. But, I'm not going to predict what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 18 months. But I will say this. I have never been more optimistic in my 8 years than I have been. You would not believe how much energy I have when I wake up every morning, because for the first time in my 8 years, I actually know that if we do something positive can happen. And previously, for the past 2 years, it was always Mitch McConnell saying no, no, no. So we could do something in the House, and that was fun, and it'd be historic, but it would always die right there. Even before then, we couldn't even do anything in the House, and it was just getting more co-sponsors, building up support, being a positive voice for the industry. But now to know that, listen, if we can get something to Senator Schumer, he will put it on the Senate floor and they will vote on it and get it to the president. Now the hard work begins, but we have light at the end of the tunnel to shoot for. And that's what makes me very optimistic.
That's great. When we last talked, you talked about low-hanging fruit. And I think during one of the quotes I read this week, I saw that same quote. I was like, hey, that's consistent. The Safe Banking Act seems to be the one that both sides of the aisle can agree on. And both have, I would think, interests to passing this, to giving access to banks for the cannabis industry. That plus the descheduling of it, which would technically decriminalize the plant. Those two alone, if that's all you get, isn't that a big win?
So the realist in me says, yes, anything we can get, and I love sports analogies, to move the chains. Do you sit back and wait for a home run, a 3-run home run, or do you get a couple singles and get it? So anything that advances cannabis reform, I'm supportive of. And if in 2 years from now we get safe and that's it, it's better than we were before. If we get safe in a deschedule bill, it's better than we were before. And so I'm optimistic, and that's what I want. But there is a large amount of energy on like House Democrats, progressive Democrats, social justice fighters, people on criminal justice reform, civil rights, that want to address all these issues. They want to go for the home run. And it's meeting somewhere in there of the striving for the great and then being realistic and accepting what Congress is willing to do. That luckily I'm not running for office and I don't have to make that decision. All I can do is build a case and build support and educate the public, because I guarantee you, the public is supportive of this. The public is there polling, but cannabis, it's widely supported, but people you're not going to get 100,000 protesters in the street on cannabis reform. You're not going to get a bunch of people donating and being politically active. It's something to get that grassroots motivated and get people excited and get fundraising, and to lift that up and explain to someone like a Joe Manchin in West Virginia why this is a good issue. You have legalization in South Dakota, or ballot initiatives that pass in South Dakota. You have a high-ranking, Senate Republican, John Thune, who's there. Like, get to him and say, voters of South Dakota think this is very important. This is why you need to do it. It's building those cases on an individual basis to get these people to move. But I go like, where is the temperature? Where is the reality of what we can get? I use the low-hanging fruit. SAFE is ready to go. I would love nothing more than they pass SAFE in the next couple of months and then move on to the complex issue and spend the next year on, marijuana legalization, more, or what version of tax and regulate they can come up with. To me, that's logic, but Congress never deals in reality or logic. And so it's just something, we just have to manage. And it is a little different. The priorities right now, priority one is getting the vaccines out to people, making sure, right, the vaccines are out to people. Mm-hmm. Priority two is Congress is thinking about a pandemic funding bill, get some cash in people's hands. They're debating that. And then priority three right now, the Senate is in the process of this trial with former President Trump. And that's taking a lot of energy and bandwidth out of Congress. So yes, it is a priority, but the priority could be 2 months from now, 3 months from now, where they start getting onto it. And so there's other things besides cannabis that are really important to the American people and policymakers.
And yet a school that I've taught at, Emerson College, ran a poll this week that showed that right beyond those two issues, you mentioned that second impeachment trial and the COVID Relief Act, most people in this poll believe that cannabis reform should be more important than climate change, than the minimum wage debate. So, you may be on double deck now, I guess, Michael, would be, another sports analogy there. But at least you're starting to hear people want to do something. My fear, you mentioned South Dakota. I bet you know what's going on at the state level there with the governor and the lawsuit. And this is what bothers me. For years, the ballot box had been king as far as letting the people who vote dictate what they thought would be a good change, whether it's a state amendment to a constitution or a movement, whatever social justice is out there. And cannabis has always driven people to the polls. Now states are using that ballot box, and Idaho trying to eliminate the ballot box as a tool for democracy really bothers me. I feel threatened a lot as an American that this and cannabis right in the middle of it. I mean, isn't, and oh, by the way, we also had that little insurrection that was going on a few weeks ago too. I mean, I'm more scared about being an American in 2021 than I have been in any time. I'd like to see the elected officials listen to the people that put them there. That is what a democracy is.
Yeah. You bring up a lot of good points. And, my view in all my years of politics is if the public really wants something, eventually they're going to get it. Now, it could be slow. It could take 5 years, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, but they're going to get there because that's what the public wants. Now, what's happening in South Dakota is wrong, but it's a political decision. And I hope the voters of South Dakota hold people accountable. And if that's what the governor wants and that's what policymakers want, run on that. Tell the public and say, this is what I want, and then see where the voters go. And in Idaho, it's the same thing. But you've seen poll after poll after poll, election after election after election. The support of this is 60 to 80+%, depending on, how you ask, where it's at. You saw this in Oklahoma where 56+% voted for cannabis like 2 years ago. You saw Mississippi just did a medical marijuana and got 60+%. A couple years ago in Florida, it was 70+%. So if I'm a politician and I start thinking, wow, 70% of my voters want something, I should probably come around. Now, there are principles. People have their principles and can run it. That's great. But I have talked to a lot of Republicans, and their view has been, listen, I'm personally not supportive of this, but I see where my voters are going and they represent their state. And that's like the least you would expect from a person that, listen, whether you support cannabis or not, your voters are, and this is time to come around to where they're at. And eventually, and like I said, it may slow up progress in South Dakota or Idaho or some other states, but I know eventually, people are you're going to see South Dakota is going to be surrounded, all the neighbors around Idaho. And, my view is, okay, great, Idaho, you do that. Everyone's going to Montana, Washington, Oregon, everywhere else to buy their cannabis, and all those tax dollars are going to get lost to go to those other states. And eventually they're going to say, wow, we're losing out. And, just recently, Colorado was showing some data and the hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming in that are able to fund, the taxes that are able to fund some of these issues. And other states are looking at bringing in cannabis just so they can cut their income taxes. These debates are policy issues, and I want them having those debates.
Fantastic. David, you got anything before we go to a break? Are you good?
I got something, Jimmy. So, Michael, talk to us a little bit about Idaho. The legislature up there, the Senate is trying to make it so they can't legalize marijuana, right?
Yeah.
And they passed it by one vote. They're surrounded by states that have legalized in some manner or another, which all that means that if they fully make it that you can't legalize it, those people keep going over the border, but it still has to get by the House, and then it has to go in 2022 in front of the people.
Yes. So, and then here's my point on that. And right when that happened, someone sent me the news story, and I go, yeah, sure, but this has to go in front of the voters. And do we really think that? And here's the thing. I'm a believer in democracy, and I'm a believer in what the voters do. And if Idaho voters don't want it, then they don't get it. Give them a chance to do it. I think Idaho policymakers would be a little surprised of the results if they put it out there. And I think it would be a great test run. And listen, this buys them 18 months, 2 years. And then they put it on the ballot, the voters say no, and then they bring it back up on a ballot initiative or go from there. So it may delay it, but the voters are still there. And listen, hopefully if voters are smart, they'll start voting out some of these people that have these positions that are wrong on whatever issue, they're there for. But on cannabis, it's one big one. And Jimmy, you mentioned, the partisan divide. Cannabis is the one, I hate to say it's the one great unifier. We will have the most extreme right-wingers and the extreme progressive lefties, all in the middle, centrists, and everything. The whole spectrum when it comes to supporting our issues, co-sponsors, and other things. And I think, this town is very divided, but that is one thing that seems to get people to sit around the table and talk about.
And pass a joint. Oh no, I didn't say that.
Yes.
But we kid about that, and yet I really do believe that God put this plant on the earth thousands of years ago, so that people could use it as a healing device, not just for what may ail you, and the dozen different diagnoses or 24 diagnoses out there, but also just to have people connect. It's a connecting medicine for humanity. And I'm glad to hear that they're actually, by the way, would love to see some kind of a sesh in Congress where you've got Republicans and Democrats actually talking about this openly. I'm fascinated by the fact that we're in 2021 and that cannabis itself is part of the whole policy of government. And just because I've lived long enough to live through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, and here it is 20 years into the 21st century, and we're finally getting back to where we were 100 years ago when U.S. doctors wrote 5 million prescriptions for cannabis in the 1920s, and I love using that stat because people go, whoa, really? I go, yeah, really, and you wonder if let's just say if we didn't prohibit it in 1937, would we have as many cases of epilepsy or cancer or all these ills? I mean, it's just incredible to me. And then the conspiracy person in me starts thinking about, geez, did Big Pharma drive all this? Are you concerned about, if we do go finally legal, that Big Pharma will control the whole industry?
Well, I mean, I'm not concerned. I'm worried that, it's not worried. I want, the day after legalization, we like you've been saying for all these years, we've been fighting for all these years. And then legalization happens and we go, wow, I'm not comfortable with that. Like, it's something I didn't want or I don't recognize. And let's be honest, no one wants legalization. And then the day after, they have to go to their pharmacist to get some synthesized drug or something to treat it. And, NCIA's view is free the plant. It's free the plant, deschedule this bill. But to think that this is going to be a commodity like tomatoes, that's not going to happen. We need to somehow treat this, create a regulatory structure, do something, because it is a drug. It is a drug, and it's something we have to watch. But I look at this, I see the parallels with alcohol. You can brew beer in your own house. Anyone can brew beer in their house. You can go down to a liquor store or a store and buy beer, and you can go to a bar and consume beer. There's that sort of freedom around it. I want the same thing, and I want the plant free, but at the same time, I want the science. And if there's pharma out there that says, oh man, we've synthesized this portion, this cannabinoid or something addresses this issue, this is wonderful. Market it, sell it, do whatever. I don't want it at the expense of freeing the plants, and use the science, do whatever you can on other things. And as long as that happens, I'm happy. But yeah, to agree, I'm not seeing any energy that way, but I could see that happening. I don't want to go in that direction where we free the plant and all of a sudden it's locked back up behind a pharmacy.
Right. I get you. I'm all for that. And I think freedom will prevail and the right will happen. One last question before I let you go. And we've completely blown off our show at this point. Anyway, as far as the format goes, we missed 4:20 and Lord knows it's Friday at 4:20. I like that time. But I do want to ask one more thing. So when I sat with Steve D'Angelo a year ago in Jamaica, and he explained to me that the executive of the government can call the Department of Justice and make an administrative or an executive decision of some kind to deschedule the plant. If you find things stalling amongst fellow legislators for whatever reason, and you can kind of say, look, maybe would the president, would Joe Biden be in a position to just say, look, let's deschedule it, and then the Congress opens up the banks, and then we'll, like you say, take a step back, and then roll out a full legalization program that would be controlled by a new body, or maybe the Alcoholic Beverage Commission or whatever. Do you think that scenario could happen?
So, one, the president doesn't have power to snap their fingers and legalize cannabis, but
Right.
they have the authority to direct the administration to start the process of, findings and what it would take to deschedule the bill, which
Right.
would start the process and then eventually lead to the descheduling of cannabis or rescheduling of cannabis.
Okay.
Congress could do it. When they asked Obama that, he had the power to do that, but he said, this is an important decision and I want Congress to do it. Right or wrong, you can respect it as what he said. So I could see something, the vice president is Kamala Harris. She was a supporter of a co-sponsor of the MORE Act.
Mm-hmm.
She's from California. Like, she understands the nuances of the issue in industry. And I could see if Congress doesn't do anything over the next 2 years, maybe there's some momentum to maybe do something administratively, start that process. That's something they definitely could do. And that's something, we want to educate as many of these nominees and appointees who are going to fill up our government of understanding cannabis and what they can do administratively to make this a lot easier. So yes, it's possible.
Well, we want your job to be a little easier, Michael, because we know for the most part, you do work your fanny off. And we the people out here who support the NCIA and also the cause support you. And we wish you the best in the future. At least the atmosphere has changed a little bit over the last few weeks down there, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I've gotten a lot busier, but I'm definitely excited and energized of what the next year or two is going to play out.
All right. Well, Michael Correia from the NCIA, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday afternoon. We always look forward to talking with you, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you.
All right. So we are past our 4:20 break, so we will take it a little late. And then, David, when you and I come back, we'll regroup. I want to hear I want to hear what you heard in that interview. I'd like to get your perspective on what Michael talked about. And then we welcome in a special guest, Tina Sbrega from the Gardner Federal Credit Union, on the next half hour of Cannabis Chat, also known as the Green Rush, with David Rabinovitz and Jimmy Young. We'll be back with more after this. Don't go away. It's 4:20 time. You know what that means. Shanty time.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I'd forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the
Hey.
Green Nurse Podcast.
Woo!
We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
I'm up. I'm back. All right. So I'm back. All right. We are working with our guest, Tina Sbrega from Gardner Federal Credit Union, who's on with us, but she's going to try and get her video camera to turn on her computer. In the meantime, I can tell you a little something about the Gardner Federal Credit Union and about Tina Sbrega. She's really been a leader in helping cannabis companies, industries that actually touch the plant, as well as MRBs, marijuana-related businesses, do their finances, actually handle their money. Because if you know anything about cannabis restrictions, not only can't you write off business expenses, but you're not even supposed to be able to bank with traditional banks right now. There are there's a handful of banks in Massachusetts where this program originates that do business with marijuana-related businesses. But the Gardner Federal Credit Union, I believe, was the first in Massachusetts to do business with, and there she is. There she is. So now you want to take off your phone and we'll be able to punch you up and get to see you and we can smile at you and all that neat stuff. No, you're muted. That's all. Now you're fine.
You're muted. Tina, you can hear us?
Can you hear us, Tina?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yes. And we can even see you too. Yeah, and if you look at your computer,
right.
You'll be like looking right at us. So that's great. And thank you for that. And it's good to see you. You know, I was just saying that your credit union, I'm pretty sure, was the first one in Massachusetts to actually allow cannabis businesses to come work with you. Am I right?
You are correct. Recreational. So let's just make that point clear. So we were
Yes.
the first institution in Massachusetts to bank the recreational market and
That's-
medicinal and ancillary. And everything.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. And it's been quite a ride, Jimmy. We've learned, we dedicated an awful lot of time to learning about the industry. We have an immense amount of appreciation for our cannabis clients and all cannabis operators. It's an exciting time, I think, for all of us, and GFA and myself and our cannabis banking team really are just very excited and happy to be a part of it.
That's
Yeah,
great. Is David still with
even
you?
amidst COVID.
Yeah, that's all right. That's great.
He
Is
is.
David? Good. And we have a David too. And I know that David has much more of a financial background than I do. He's more of an analyst, and he's also the treasurer of MassCan now. So, David, I guarantee you have a question you want to ask Tina.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Okay, David, do me a favor. Come into thank you very
there
much.
we go.
Much better. Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
Tina, just while I understand some of this, but for our wider audience, explain some of what makes banking a marijuana firm so challenging.
Federal illegality and regulation. And so that's the short answer, right? So I don't know how much time you want me to, and how granular you want me to get, but I think it is important because we get asked that question a lot. And so, and I know some of the talks that we'll have, probably some of the conversations will be about regulations, which this is really all it's about. We're dealing with a dichotomy between federal and state laws. It's legal at the state level, it's illegal at the federal level. Cannabis operators are considered a high-risk business because of the federal illegality, and also because of the fact that it is a cash-intensive business. When you put those two things together, you're talking about high-risk business, higher risk than, say, a money service business. And so the financial institution has to look for, basically, has to comply with 4 key regulations. One of them is KYC, know your customer. The other one is, all the FinCEN guidelines, so the Financial Institution Crimes Enforcement Network, which really says, hey, make sure that your cannabis clients aren't part of the cartel, they're not part of gangs, money isn't being subverted to illegal entities. And then to piggyback on that, you've got BSA, which is Bank Secrecy Act, which is monitoring the flow of physical cash. And then you have anti-money laundering. And when you take the BSA piece of it and the anti-money laundering piece of it, it just really becomes a very complex business to manage, because you have to know who they're doing business with, where the money's coming from. So it is definitely different. We've always looked at it and said, we want to normalize our cannabis clients, and we want to be able to treat them like we treat any other legal, legitimate business. But regulations prevent us from really doing that. We treat them like they should be treated, but regulations don't let us just go and open up their checking account and go their merry way.
So we're 2 days away from Valentine's Day, which means that we're 7 years out from the famous FinCEN memo. So FinCEN back in 2014 said to the banking community, look, if you want to deal with marijuana clients, here's what we would like you to do. How is it that you folks were able to figure out how to make it work, but most bankers, even with the FinCEN guidance, couldn't get there?
So, David, I don't think I would say that it's that they can't figure it out. I think that you have to, when we did our due diligence and considered whether or not we were interested in serving the cannabis industry, you have to take a look at, you do a risk assessment. And, some of those risks are reputation risk. So I think over time, the stigma is being removed from the industry. But, you may have a lot of boards of directors who are going to make this final decision and just be concerned about does that harm the financial institution's reputation? I think the second piece of it is regulatory risk. So I always, I said to our board of directors, if and when we decide to go down this route, it's regulations on steroids. And you have to understand that when our regulators come in to do their safety and soundness exam on a 18-month cycle, they're going to be extremely focused on making sure that we have all of the T's crossed and all of the I's dotted. And so it puts the institution in the regulator's eyes as a high-risk institution. And with that comes additional levels of scrutiny and oversight. So when you put it all together and between the reputation risk and the regulatory risk and the compliance risk, which is huge, some institutions just aren't ready to make that move yet. I think in Massachusetts, we are very, very fortunate. Jimmy said early on, we've got several financial institutions that are openly, legally banking the cannabis industry. And we look to other states, you look to Colorado, they went 5 years before they had a financial institution. So I think we're very fortunate that we have so many that are willing to step up to the plate. It's still a small percentage nationwide. I think I read, there are 700 something financial institutions across the entire nation that are openly banking the industry. That'll change over time.
It'll certainly change if Michael Correia can do his job and move the needle in Congress and get this thing descheduled. I know you're familiar with the Safe Banking Act, and I'm sure you're familiar with the MORE Act as well. I'm not sure which way we're going to go. If we deschedule cannabis and the Safe Banking Act does get passed and does open up the traditional banks to cannabis, what effect will that have on the credit unions who've been so friendly to cannabis over the last few years?
Yeah. So in my humble opinion, if the Safe Banking Act or the MORE Act or something else passed tomorrow, in my opinion, I don't think you're going to see a mass entry of all financial institutions. There's still going to be the regulatory risk. It's still the industry for the foreseeable future. I think it's still going to be considered high risk. It's still a cash intensive business. And there's still always that room for bad players. And that's going to keep the regulations high in terms of, the monitoring and the reporting. I think, like anything, there'll just be more availability. Competition is good. I'd like to say that over time, I don't know what that time is. I don't have that, I can't predict the stock market tomorrow, and I also don't know what that time is. I think we've got a period of years before we can truly say the cannabis industry can be banked just like any other manufacturing or any other retail store. And especially ancillary could be banked, just like any other business. We're not there yet, and it doesn't happen just because the Safe Banking Act or the MORE Act passes tomorrow.
Yeah, we're part of a historic movement, though. You feel like you're part of a historic movement, Tina, during this time?
Sure, we do. Yeah, we're very, very excited about it. It's it's put some energy. Not that we lacked energy, but it's put a renewed sense of energy. Some new things and some challenges, and we love challenges. So we do what we do to make sure that we operate in a compliant fashion, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we take that personal service and, piggyback that on to a compliant banking program.
So, Tina, a lot of understandably, the businesses that are consumer facing deal in a lot of cash.
Yeah.
I would expect that your retail customers deal in a lot of cash and deposit a lot of cash. On the other sides of the business, the manufacturers, the growers, the companies that don't have retail, do you see them dealing in a lot of cash, or are they primarily conventional electronic type, moving electrons around from accounting.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone other than retail, I always say to, a cultivator, if you're going to be buying product or selling product and someone's going to pay you in cash, you should really wonder why, because everybody should have access to banking solutions. So the cash intensive nature really is, as you pointed out, confined to the retail operators, but that's changing slowly. When we first started banking the cannabis industry, I would say the cash represented probably 60 to 70% of the deposits, and the rest were, ACH transactions. And I would say in a very short period of time, that's probably transitioned to maybe 60-40. So 60% are now debit card transactions on average, and 40 are cash. So over a short period of time, we've been successful collectively in making that transition.
Can I ask, do you know what the percentage is of plant touching businesses that you do business with versus MRBs, the ancillary group?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers. I know
Make them
that
up, Tina. I'm never going to check on them, okay?
we have, one of the things that we do is we allow people to open up accounts earmarked, so we call them pre-operating accounts. So they're earmarked,
okay,
identified as you're going to be in the cannabis industry, you're doing an investment raise, you need a transparent place to put your money. You don't want to be running your expenditures through your personal account or your other business account. So we have probably about 300 clients altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Some are pre-operating in very early stages. Many are getting ready to operate, commence operations. And then we serve a fair number of ancillary businesses, whether it's a testing lab or a architectural firm or a manufacturer of cartridges or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I would say pretty spread. If I had to guess, I'd say probably 75% are plant touching and 25% are ancillary.
Which I think may reflect the industry too. David?
So, Tina, your Gardner clearly is the lead in the state. What's your estimation of how many of the marijuana businesses in the state, percentage-wise, you're banking?
So,
you're banking more than everything else combined.
Including pre-operating, so those that are in the licensure process, with the CCC, we're at 46%.
I'm sure you're familiar with some of the politics and some of the pushback on these host security agreements that are out there that have caused so much problems. And again, I don't want to get into politics as much, but I don't know if those HCAs, I think they're called, right, David? Isn't that what they're called? Host
community agreements.
Host community agreements. I don't know if they're going to stick around. I don't know if the legislature is going to get involved a little bit more or not. But how challenging must it be for the people that come to you looking for a safe place to put their money, start their business, and then a year and a half down, they're still waiting for that HCA. They're still waiting for their commence operations. That's got to be really frustrating from even just a human perspective, let alone the business perspective.
I tell many of them, when we call it their journey. So when we start talking with an applicant, one of the first questions, because we like to get to know them, and we like to see where they are in their journey in terms of what we can expect for types of banking transactions. So we'll always ask, so how far along are you in your journey? And we, quickly realized, exactly to your point, Jimmy, it is a journey, and it's a long journey, and it's, take 5 steps forward and 3 backwards sometimes. I always tell them that I could never apply for a license because I don't have the patience or the intestinal fortitude to do it. I mean, some people, we just moved a pre-operating account to a commence operations and they've been with us for 2 years.
Wow.
They just got the approval to open their doors. And we, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, you think about it and you say, well, you know, there's success at the end, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but we've also seen operators struggle where, you know, you thought maybe, like if I want to go open up a shoe store, I'm going to form my company, right? I'm going to form my company, I'm going to find a location, and I'm going to buy my inventory, and in a couple of months, I'm going to be generating some revenue. And I'm not being critical of the process. I think that, you know, I think the Cannabis Control Commission does a great job managing this influx of and doing it in a proper fashion. So we have the right players in our state, not like some other states where they have quite a mixture. So I think everyone is doing what we would want them to do so that we can have a safe and compliant marketplace. But at the same time, there's just, sometimes you just don't realize how long the journey is going to be. And some people struggle because the finish line isn't as soon as they had hoped.
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people expect to go in, get their license, open their doors in 30 days, and the cash is just going to start coming in. And then they realize that that's a dream, and reality is a lot longer than that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What kind of fees do you guys have for the MRBs and plant touching? Are they similar fees per month as far as keeping your checking account alive there?
Similar to?
So in other words, is there a difference between an MRB fee and a plant touching fee? I guess would be the direct question.
So yeah, so we do our pricing according to the risk and the level of monitoring.
Gotcha.
So obviously, you know, if you think about a retail operator, lots of cash coming in, lots of ACH transactions coming in, high volume, a lot of monitoring that has to happen, a lot of cash reporting, compared to a cultivator, for example, that might have 2 or 3 large deposits a month when they sell their crop.
Mm-hmm.
So we price the products according to how much monitoring do we have to do, how much reporting, how many suspicious activity reports or currency transaction reports do we have to file.
David?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jimmy. I thought you were on a roll there.
I am on a roll, but I would love for you to jump in. Go ahead.
So I wished I had planned this better because I'm very jealous of your backdrops. I should have had a big GFA logo behind me with a plant.
That's right.
I didn't realize I was going to be on a radio talk show. I didn't realize I was going to be visual.
We could take a break, Tina, and I could just send you over what the backdrop is, and then you could have a backdrop too.
Tina, I'm just happy to have you here. You know, I remember the beginning, okay? And I'm still here too, and I'm thrilled that we finally got a chance to actually get you on with us, whether it's through video or audio. I give you a lot of credit for opening your doors, allowing people to come in and do business with you. And I'm a big supporter of credit unions in the first place anyway. So I guess the next, I have another question about, can people come to the credit union and apply for a loan, a business opening loan? Is that possible or not at the credit union?
We started a pilot program in 2020. We've made, interestingly enough, and I think everyone would appreciate this, the demand is greater than the supply. You know, when we went to our regulators 4 years ago and said, hey, we want to bank the cannabis industry, but we want to be very transparent to you. So we're going to talk to you about all of our policies, procedures, plans, et cetera. So then we went back about a year ago and we went to the regulators and we said, okay, we want to be very transparent with you as always, and we want to start lending to the cannabis industry. Well, not that there's an aversion to lending to cannabis, but typically when you're making a commercial loan for someone, you're making a loan to an established business, right? So you come to me, you've got your business, you've been running your business for 3 years, you've got steady cash flow, you can show that you can support the debt. If you're a brand new operator and you want to start your first business, you come to us and we say, well, you have no cash flow to show, so we'll look to the SBA, Small Business Association, federal entity, and perhaps they will provide an SBA guarantee on the loan. So now you've got a brand new operator, brand new industry, no cash flow, no historical cash flow for the industry itself in this state, some volatility in where pricing is going to go for the product, and no SBA guarantee. So as you can imagine, we had a lot of work to do to convince our regulators that this was going to be a safe, sound decision. So we came out with a pilot program. Long story short, we were restricted to a pretty low concentration limit. So hence supply being much less than the demand. We'll do conventional lending, so commercial real estate property. We will lend to on major equipment. Obviously we can't lend on the value of a cannabis license because that would be illegal for us, even though those licenses are worth millions and millions of dollars. And obviously we can't lend to finance the purchase of product or anything like that.
Right.
But we've done a successful program. I would say we've lent probably 15 million in the first year. And, we're working currently to try to find some financial institutions that are maybe interested in doing some participations with us, even though they might not be interested in banking the industry. They're pretty attractive loans, and well collateralized. So we're taking baby steps, I guess I would say.
Well, I'm certainly familiar with baby steps. David, you got anything else last? David's muted, okay, which is, a lot of people like to mute me, but that doesn't work very well. Go ahead, David.
So I've got a question, Tina, but I also have a comment. Somebody just texted me to tell me this is great. Tina is outstanding. So I thought I would pass.
You've got fans.
Yep. Tina, she's always got fans.
Right.
So do you, does GFA have anything along the lines of merchant services? Like when we were talking earlier with the retailers, you talked about the amount of cash, but more of them are starting to be able to accept debit cards. Does GFA offer that to cannabis clients?
We don't, but we do work with multiple third parties. So we've done a lot of due diligence, and so we give our clients a list of businesses. As they build out their ecosystem, we give them a list of businesses that we know truly support the cannabis industry. So within that list of businesses, there are 4 or 5 merchant processors that the clients can go to for those debit cards, or I should say cashless ATM closed loop solutions. So we don't do the processing ourselves. We do serve as an originating financial institution for a third-party payment processor if they so choose, but we're not the engine behind it.
There you go. And there's more and more people getting into that space. And in our next hour, we're going to be talking to a few of them. I'm finding more and more people are getting into that. What's
Ashley Elsner. You're talking to Ashley Elsner at Artery Pay.
We love Ashley.
You are.
Yeah. That's great. Oh no, we're big supporters of what they do, and that's exactly that was actually what we call a segue, Tina, that we move into our second hour. So first of all, great to see you again. We both survived the last year, and you're welcome here anytime. And we look forward to you're continuing to follow us, and we follow you, and we're all in it together, right?
Jimmy, one
Thank you.
last question. So Tina, if somebody is getting into the business, they need a banking relationship. Well, how do they initiate that with GFA?
I'd love to talk to them. I'll personally take care of them all the way through until the time that they're introduced to their concierge banker.
Great.
Wow.
And how can they reach out to you?
My email address, I don't know if you can get that on the screen at some point, but it's
I think we can.
I certainly, your name has been up and your last name, which we all know is not as Smith. We will put it up there, but we know what it is and we'll share that with the audience. How's that?
okay. That would
Terrific.
be perfect.
All right. Well, thank you.
Good seeing you guys.
Good
Be
seeing you.
safe and well.
Well, to you too. That's Tina
Take
Sbrega
care.
from the Gardner Federal Credit Union, and she's very well respected and appreciated by the community. We will take a little bit of a break, and we'll come back on the other side with the last hour of the Green Rush, the business of cannabis. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, as a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, "Hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what?" I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports and talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs, that's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old, the standard bearer in the market, is with a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of Experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So, if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, welcome back to the Green Rush live on Pro Cannabis Media's live stream here. And we are so happy to have with us once again our friend Ashley Elsner from Artery Pay, joining me and David Rabinovitz here in our chat room in our Friday afternoon Green Rush discussion about the business of cannabis. And Ashley, even though David and I are very familiar with Artery Pay, and in fact, Tina Sbrega from Gardner Federal Credit Union preceded you and spoke very highly of you. And tell us a little bit, how is Artery Pay going? I know that, as the Venmo for weed, if you will, you guys have a great elevator pitch and a great little rollout. And I understand that you're not on the West Coast. Explain where you are and why.
Okay, you've got it. And actually, that may be changing relatively quickly, but I will get into that in a little bit. I'm Ashley Elsner. I am the co-founder and chief operating officer / general counsel / chief compliance officer, yay startups, of Artery Pay. Artery Pay is an ACH-based transaction wallet platform that works exactly like Venmo. It's super easy for your customers to sign up. It's a really nice experience for them. And it makes it very easy, inexpensive, and manageable for businesses to be able to accept payments as well as to pay vendors, do payroll, do all kinds of transactive things. And we give you a fair price. So.
And you're in Massachusetts. I know that.
Yes.
Where else are you operating?
So we are currently open in Massachusetts as well as Nevada. In Massachusetts, our banking partner is Radius Bank that provides ACH processing and custody for wallet funds. We also have a contract with the state of Nevada Treasury to be the payment processing system there for the cannabis industry. And we also have a money transmitter license in Washington State. We are currently in the process of getting a money transmitter license in the state of Oklahoma. So we're starting to expand. We are expecting to be able to launch some services on the West Coast for California relatively soon. I cannot give you exact dates on these things because a lot of things have to do with regulatory hurdles and jumping through the licensing process hurdles.
Mhm.
So when that happens, it's going to be great. We're going to be able to provide services pretty much anywhere that cannabis is legal.
Is that good? Are you going to, as you look down the road, are you looking at other countries, other continents, if you will, to expand your services, or are you going to be limited to the United States, and have you looked at Canada at all?
So, of course, Canada is absolutely wonderful. They are so blessed not to have the problems that we have with the dual legality issues.
Oh, yes, there is that. Right.
Which basically means that cannabis businesses in Canada do not have problems with banking and do not have problems with payment processing.
Good.
I don't know what the pricing is, can't speak to that, but
That's right.
the US is rather unique in this front because we have challenges that have been created by the requirements to maintain state confines around the industries in order not to trigger that federal prohibition. So sorry, yes, everybody, I'm a lawyer, and we may end up getting a little bit deep into the weeds on some of these things if time allows. But basically, that means that the United States is a place that has more challenges and has more pain points in that place. We are interested in international eventually, but that's going to be quite a ways down the road with respect to cannabis. We also, as a financial institution ourselves, what we've done that's unique within our system is we've actually built the banking compliance into the transaction system. So for banks that are interested in working with the cannabis space, this is an easy plug-in system that is just turnkey and allows them to be able to have a completely legal, legitimate way to work with the cannabis industry on the compliance front without having to necessarily add additional people into the back or overburden their staff with, as Tina mentioned, the extremely burdensome reporting burdens that go on in the cannabis space.
Compliance.
But yes, international, yes. That is a place that we'd like to play eventually, but for right now, we're a startup, finite resources.
That's right. I get that too. David, you got something for Ashley? Because I know you enjoy talking to her.
Your clients would be what? You would sign up the retail stores, or who do you go after in the ecosystem?
So each state actually has unique needs on the financial front. Like in Massachusetts, for example, you have wonderful institutions like GFA. You've got people like Tina who are at the forefront of being able to provide banking services in a legitimate way to the cannabis space. In other states, there's been a much stronger lag from the banking side to be able to work with the cannabis space. So actually, for us, we are able to go in with a single system to work on payment processing, custody of funds, getting them the ability to have their funds in the traditional banking systems and be able to use those funds, even if they have difficulty getting banking. So what we have is a transaction and compliance platform that has been melded together to be able to support the entire industry. So we're able to work with dispensaries on the merchant processing side. We're able to work on the transaction, business to business payment side as well. We're able to work as a stopgap when people have difficulty finding banking or lose their banking for things that had nothing to do with their actual business behaviors and everything to do with either a change to the risk assessment or a misunderstanding of the business when they were signing up for those services. So that's what we've done. We've done a holistic view of this to provide what is essentially really outstanding technology, as well as a financial institution base to actually push it out. And so it makes it legal, it makes it compliant. And actually, what's really nice about our system is because we have had a focus on the user interface, it's so easy to use. I mean, that's just not true for a lot of products in the cannabis space. There's been a lot of interest, for sure, from technology providers, but they don't understand the financial side. And then on the financial side, maybe they have more difficulty designing the tech, but we have both. And so the user experience for a consumer signing up for a wallet with us is just fast and easy and non-intrusive while we get all the information we need. And then from the financial institution perspective, we do enhanced know your customer on all of the merchant businesses, on all the cannabis businesses that are involved. We do all of the steps that are needed. We're on their side. We're a partner. We're a partner to banks. Now, we don't recommend, of course, putting your deposits with non-deposit institutions, right? We would rather you have a direct relationship with a bank, but sometimes that's just not an option. And you still need something that's going to allow you to operate outside of cash. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight about our platform is we actually have the ability to digitize that cash and give you access to it within the traditional banking system because we verify the source of the funds from the source of the transaction. So it's really a nice system. Everything is clean, everything is neat. We've got automated reporting. So it gets regulators comfortable, financial and cannabis regulators. It gets the government comfortable that they know what's going on in their systems because you've got an additional tracking line outside of metric that's not self-reported. The financial institutions are comfortable because you've identified all of the parties to the transactions and you're not you're not trying to use some sort of a technological trick as a workaround for consent, for example. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the businesses being able to operate, in an inexpensive way, in a way that delights their customers and actually allows them to do business like any other business.
Are you getting more competition out there? I'm starting to hear that there might be some people that are trying to and that imitation is the greatest form of flattery, trying to perhaps do what you're doing.
Well, of course they are. Of course they are going to try. There are a number of institutions out there that are offering digital wallet services. But I will say that some of the things that they're missing is really that focus on systems design, the focus on actually being a regulated institution. I'm just going to say this, if you are a digital wallet provider, you are a financial institution as soon as it's hooked into a banking system. That's movement of money. That's money transmission, which means you're regulated. You are regulated at the state level under money transmission laws. Now, there are a few states that have some exemptions and exclusions that allow you to operate without a money transmitter license, so long as you're operating above board. But there's not very many of them. There's not very many of them at all. I think Montana is the only state that legitimately has no money transmitter laws on the books and does not regulate it at all. Then there are other solutions out there that tried to implicate some kind of card processing. And, I heard one of them mentioned on the call, and I understand that these things are being used a lot, but these are not systems that I would recommend. And the reason why is because they are highly susceptible to having assets frozen. And the reason why is because when you take a look at the difficulty of accessing versions of card processing, the consent that you're looking for is really from the card issuer bank, right? And so those major card issuer banks are like Capital One, Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo. This is who people have their credit cards from. This is who they get their debit cards from. I mean, generally speaking, if you see a brand on there that comes from a card network, then it's probably not going to be okay for you to, it's probably not okay to accept those transactions as a cannabis business. And I just wanted to very quickly point that out. And, anything that gets you out of cash is going to be better for your business. So I definitely understand the challenges there. And of course, everybody wants the easiest thing that has the lowest barriers to entry. But realistically, in the United States, anything touching a card at this point that comes from an issuing organization that you've heard of is probably not allowed.
Right.
It's probably not around. And I'm just going to, let me put it this way. And this is my take on the cashless ATMs. So you've got somebody who brings you a technology. This is my analogy. They bring you a technology that they say is going to get you out of paying your taxes if you use it. That sounds awesome, especially for cannabis with 280E. Yes, sign me up, right? Right?
Yeah.
But think about that for a second. Do you really believe it? Do you really believe that somebody's got some secret sauce that gets you access to something that nobody else can do legally?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
I have strong doubts about the legitimacy of those systems. I have very strong doubts. And, I am a financial institution lawyer by background. There are no workarounds in finance. If somebody tells you that you can't have access to a system and it's somebody with a background like mine, I don't think there's any financial lawyers out there who would, after seeing the way that these transactions are done, would pass that business model. I just don't think they would. Technology is not a replacement for consent.
Right. David?
So how does something like the Safe Banking Act impact you? Does that mean that all of a sudden, if the banks all open up to it, your platform just isn't needed anymore? And how does your platform in that scenario compare to some of the others that are out there?
Okay, so here's what's unique about our platform as compared with everybody else who's providing a digital wallet. We have built the complex banking compliance stuff into the transaction system. So for banks that are like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden safe banking has gone through, I really want to get into this cannabis space because it's great revenue opportunity. How do I manage the expenses of the ongoing compliance regulations that FinCEN has issued? Because that doesn't come off the table just because safe banking is passed. And so, we're a ready to go platform that makes that very, very easy and very inexpensive for them to work with the space. We automate all of the reporting that is, but for cannabis, you don't need to report it, but they're making you report it because it's cannabis. And we bring that reporting burden and the investigation burden on the BSA, AML, fraud prevention. We bring that transaction monitoring burden back down to a normal level for any other business. And we actually believe that this is something that's applicable well outside of cannabis. So you start talking about high-risk spaces such as, Tina mentioned one, money services businesses like my own, where maybe you've got like this cool technology that you want to deploy that's going to be a really pretty user interface, but you've got no idea how to do the back office of a financial institution. And yet you're a financial institution, like, hey, plug into this. It makes it done for you. It's super, super simple and easy to do. And because we're tooling it to those specific high risk industries, it gives you some added, it basically gives you some added value there. Because that's actually not even something that's being done in the compliance space at all. They've got fraud prevention, they've got anti-money laundering. Some people are doing both together. none of them are really tooling specific to behaviors that you're seeing in industries. And we have, because it takes a lot of research, but then once you get those things worked out of behaviors that you're expecting to see, it's going to be much, much easier for people to be able to manage those high risk industries in that way. Then the other piece about this is we're cost effective. When credit card processing is available, that's going to be high risk cost. But when it is legal, we'll be able to provide that too. I mean, listen, we are platform agnostic. It's not that we want only to be providing ACH processing. It's that's the only thing that I can say definitively right now is legal for this industry.
So if I were a consumer, how do I subscribe, sign up, and then use Artery Pay?
Go to your app store. You go to your app store, you download the app. The information we ask you for, yeah, please. The information and I'm actually sad because like I could have shared if I were doing this on my computer, which has the camera in a weird spot, I could have actually shown you a demo of how you sign up for it. But the information that we get from you is we scan your driver's license, we get your phone number, we get your email address, we do 2-factor authentication, you create a password. I recommend creating a password that you don't use for other accounts. I mean, these are, right? And then when you go through and you want to hook up your bank account, you just go to the tile on the front page that says link a bank account. And it's going to take you to an interface that looks a lot like Plaid. However, it's a provider that is willing to work with us specifically on cannabis, as well as other high-risk verticals, but specifically on cannabis, since that's our market right now. And you provide your online banking credentials. You're not giving us your account number. You're not giving us your routing number. And all of that's securely encrypted. And as soon as that's hooked up, you're ready to go. Bam. Take a picture. You get your receipts. Everything's managed very easily.
Can you?
And we also do some really nice things with respect to rewarding the consumer for using our application. So, but we're also a financial institution. So like it's okay for us to be providing certain consumer incentives. In Massachusetts, for example, the cannabis industry is really not allowed to provide any of those things directly.
So where would I find the app? On the App Store or go to your website?
App Store.
App
Store. Do you have
I
an
knew
iPhone?
that.
Well,
I knew
put
that.
it on and I didn't pull up for me, but I probably put it in wrong.
Yes.
Oh, it's so actually at this time, it's the one that you want to pull up is Artery Pay Lite. I believe, yeah.
Like the
L-I-T-E.
beer? L-I-T-E?
Yeah, L-I-T, like Heineken Light, L-I-T-E, Coors
Miller
Light,
Lite
L-I-T-E.
is L-I-T-E.
Yeah.
Okay,
Miller
all
Lite,
right.
L-I-T, sorry, my bad.
That's
I
all
know,
right.
I'm only
I know,
supposed to talk about Sam Adams with y'all, right?
No, you're not.
That's okay.
It's all right. Just because we're from Boston doesn't mean that's all we drink too. Usually it's vodka for me anyway. Can your platform become like a plug-in? If we, like, for instance, if Pro Cannabis Media decides they want to start selling those amazing T-shirts that I created, okay, and we want to have a safe transaction, because everybody who comes, can Artery Pay provide either a plug-in and just embed it? Is that something you guys can do?
Yes. We have beautiful systems. They're integratable. They're very easy to use. That's deliberate. We want to make this easy for you, just like it is for every other small business.
Right. Well, and you know what, Ashley, I needed to ask you that question probably about 3 weeks ago, and I just haven't had the chance to.
Oh no, please don't tell me you guys lost your card processing too.
No,
you should be able to have it.
No. First of all, it's a long story that the audience does not need to hear. However, the good news is, now that I know you can do that, we're going to figure out a way to make sure that we can, because I want to start selling these T-shirts. I really do.
Okay.
All right. And
Okay.
I think the public will like them too. And in fact, let's see, David, ask her a good question. And I'm going to go get a T-shirt in the closet because it's just around here.
I want to make sure that the people who are watching or who watch later can actually find the app. So this is the Artery Light with the big blue A, correct?
Let me just double check something quick. There is an app right now that you can use as a peer-to-peer transfer that is for Artery Pay. At this time, Artery Pay Lite is a demo app that you can play with. and you can see the functionality. So that's really something that we use as a demonstration tool, but it is fun to play with. And that's exactly what it's going to look like as, you know, as it rolls out. Artery Pay itself, you can download that as well. That's available as well. And that one is Artery Pay.
Artery, just ARTERYPAY.
Yes.
I just want to get to the head of the class with my spelling there too. There's no funky way to do that. And we will be able to do that. I mean, you're in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a really interesting state in the history of cannabis, because they went from really zero opportunity and gave out hundreds of medical dispensary licenses, like in 24 to 48 hours. And the people that are involved with it in Oklahoma are, well, not universally thrilled with it, but for the most part, it seems to be working okay. What's the temperature like of the cannabis community in Oklahoma?
The cannabis community in Oklahoma are wonderful people. They are patients over profit people. That's something that for me as a cannabis patient is just thrilling to see. The communities here actually have very much embraced the cannabis community, which is outstanding. I mean, actually I'm in Tulsa right now, and driving around Tulsa at this point, I will tell you, there are more dispensaries than churches.
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. There's as many dispensaries as you would normally see Starbucks in other places.
Wow. Go ahead. Keep talking.
And, there's great opportunities in Oklahoma as well. From a product perspective for folks that wanted to get involved in cultivation and processing, manufacturing, those kinds of things. It's true. There's a lot of dispensaries here. And, everybody seems very nice about it. They've also issued a lot of the actual medical licenses. So, they've licensed the dispensaries. They've also issued a ton of medical cards to actual consumers. So you can very easily access the cannabis market as an Oklahoma patient. That's great.
See, I went into the closet, so to speak, the storage closet, sorry. And here's our t-shirt. There's the front. That's a no-brainer because but this is what I'm most proud of. And Ashley, I'm going to give you a quick quiz because I know you've been on my In the Weeds show. You've also been on do you remember what the closing line I use on all my reports and all our shows? Do you remember what that closing line might be? Do you remember the last thing I say? It's okay. You're stunned, so you don't know. It's a whole new world of weed. Why don't you?
Yeah, that is awesome. I love that too. It looks like it's hugging me.
It's hugging the earth. The plant is here to hug the earth. It's even pointing to Oklahoma if you look really close. No, I'm only kidding.
I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Columbia.
Anyway, so now that we have these, we do want to offer them to the public, and I think we're going to designate a portion of the proceeds to charity, because if there's one thing the cannabis community does do really well is socially responsible capitalism, and we want to make sure that we do give back because there is that feeling that we are all in this together, as it were. Now, I do know that we had a couple other people planned to join us, and I'm not sure if that means they're running late or they have forgotten about us or they just can't make it. One of those two. We've lost some communication, but I do want to I just want to take a quick break. All right, I'm going to let Dan, our director, know that we're going to take a quick break here, regroup, and then we'll come back for the big finish in that final half hour. And I'm not sure you saw the beginning of our show, but we talked to Michael Correia, who's one of the lead lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Cool.
Yeah.
So we'll talk.
I agree with him. We got to get our incremental movement going so that we can keep the momentum.
Right. Small steps. And that's really where I'm going. But we'll come back in just a few minutes. Don't go away. The Green Rush continues after this.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president and co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
All right, welcome back to the Green Rush Live at Pro Cannabis Media production. That is every Friday afternoon on Eastern Time, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. We talk about the business of cannabis. I'm joined by David Rabinovitz. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and we're so happy to have friend Ashley Elsner with us. She's with Artery Pay. And at the beginning of this program, we did talk with the NCIA lead lobbyist, Michael Correia, about what's going on in Washington, D.C. And he was at that original meeting with Senator Schumer that happened about 10 days ago, where the senator reached out to all the lobbyist groups and say, okay, guys, what do you want us to work on, kind of a thing. It was a fascinating, politics is something I avoided for most of my life when I was a sportscaster. I really did try to avoid it. And now I'm talking about cannabis, I'm right in the middle of the hottest political issue outside of COVID and impeachment, let's just say. Okay. And yet, a recent poll by Emerson College says it's a very important item to a lot of people. And Ashley, as someone who's in the business, are you sensing that there might be a change on the horizon? Is it 100 days? Is it 6 months down the road? Or are we looking at almost a couple of years? What do you think about the movement here?
So I tend to take discussions on these points with a grain of salt, because frankly, you just cannot predict the speed with which Congress is going to move. It could be really fast and it could be glacial. Mm-hmm. And so, it's just very difficult to predict. I would say from my perspective, there's an opportunity while the Democrats control both houses and the presidency, right? Mm-hmm. To do a lot of things. Now, the question really comes down to if they think that this is going to move the needle for voters, what they choose to do. And we are still in the midst of an epidemic that we're dealing with right now.
Right.
And the economic fallout from that for, millions of people. So that's going to take priority. It is.
Right.
It's an
It should,
immediate
by the way.
threat.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
it's an immediate threat. That's
Right.
something that is top of mind with everyone.
Yeah. Would have been nice. Would have been nice if they actually realized that. Oh, I don't know, maybe 8 months
A
ago
year
or something
ago?
like that. A year ago
Yeah.
would be good, right? But that's another story.
That was wishful thinking with the leadership back then, but
I'll keep my mouth shut. I'm taking a deep breath. I'm relaxed. I like the new administration. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. Let's look forward, not backward. Right.
Yeah.
David, are you looking forward, backward, or are you multitasking? Because I can't tell when you look off like that.
I'm doing a little multitasking. I was looking on our YouTube feed because I've got a couple of questions for Ashley that I
Good.
Right.
Better than me, because I can't get to the chat room. Go ahead.
No. Let's keep talking on the political front for a little bit.
Oh gosh. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, sure. So yes, so they have an opportunity. There's a 2-year window here where they could get a lot done. They could. You do need bipartisan support.
Mm-hmm.
That's a truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether they're going to be able to convince enough of the Republicans just because of the divisions that were built over the time period. As someone who is from the South, I am from Georgia. I am very practical about government. And frankly, while a lot of people felt chased out of the Republican Party, I myself would say that over the last 4 years, I have felt chased out of anything that might have been like right leaning, even though I would consider myself to be a libertarian. Ideologically, I would consider myself that way, but I'm not an anarchist. I'm not, I'm not somebody who's trying to undermine rule of law or democracy. The Constitution is something that's sacred to me. So I do not condone any of the actions that have happened under the Republicans over the last 4 years. I just don't.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask you about what's going on in Idaho. And I'm sure you know, right?
This will be funny. Yeah.
Well, I'm amazed that there's so many people in Idaho who, and I understand it's a Republican state, and they now have voted to block the movement for legalization of cannabis. So to me, what they did was kind of put a stop to democracy by saying, I don't care if the people get a gazillion signatures to put a question on the ballot box, it's not going to happen. And that really bothers me. It just bothers me.
You want to hear the best thing about America?
Yes, I do.
Yes, because it's been 60 years. I'm still looking.
The best thing about America is you have the opportunity to vote with your feet. If you don't like something that's going on in a specific state, leave it. You've got the right to travel. That's a constitutional right. You can live and work anywhere you want to as a United States citizen within the U.S. borders.
Does that include the Virgin Islands and like St.
The U.S.
Thomas
Virgin Islands? Yes.
St. John? That good, because I really have I've been down there, and I got to tell you, that is where all my stresses just come right off, and I just relax and listen to the crash of the surf on the sandy beaches, and just pass out with my little favorite beverage or whatever it happens to be. It is really one of my favorite places on earth. I have a picture of one here. I think it is. Oh, there it is. See, all I have to do is look over there, and there I go back to St. Thomas again, St. John again.
Yeah.
Are you?
I myself am a medical refugee. That's why I live in California.
Right. Do you want to tell us? Would you mind sharing your story again with our audience? Because we do have different audiences. I don't know if everybody watched the In the New Weeds that we did, but the story is pretty compelling.
Yes. So I had a horrible injury when I was 23 that nearly killed me and actually caused a disability in my left leg. I nearly lost my leg. It has been a very long recovery period. I was on, as a result of that injury and the recovery and the difficulty of the recovery, I have a permanent pain syndrome called complex regional pain syndrome type 2. It is very, very nasty. It is progressive if not treated appropriately and managed appropriately. And traditional pharmaceuticals don't work very well for it. They get you to a level of just barely getting by. And for over a decade, I struggled to try to piece back my life together and adapt to my mobility issues and my pain management issues and the medical regimens that I had to go through and the pharmaceutical regimens that I had to go through. And it was a nightmare. And, you know, I tried everything from, you know, things outside of there as well. Acupuncture. I had surgical releases. I even considered amputation at one point, but it turns out that actually wouldn't work. It just migrates the pain syndrome further up your leg. I mean, these things are horrible. It's disheartening. And it is very, very difficult to live with pain. And, you know, one day my father, who's a neurologist, asked me why I hadn't tried cannabis. And
by the way, I love that part of this story. Okay.
Yes.
Because for years as a young person, I would keep it from my parents, right? And this was the 60s, 70s, and 80s, let's say, 90s too. And of course, hearing that from your dad, who was a neurologist, is tremendous. I mean, you talk about that unconditional love. He was like, why haven't you tried that?
Yes. And don't worry, I paid it forward to the rest of my family too.
Oh, good. There you go. All right. There you go.
So yes. So my dad told me, you know, the studies aren't just promising. The metadata from them is conclusive that it works for neuropathic pain syndromes.
Right.
It's conclusive.
That endocannabinoid system
it works.
Right. That endocannabinoid system actually exists. Right.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's powerful. And, you know, honestly, I just hadn't even thought about it. I'm pretty straight-laced. You know, until I got injured, I was the kind of person who was like, oh, I don't want to take medicine for headaches or for menstrual cramps or nya. Like I was one of those like, oh, I'll just bear through it. It's the mind over matter. Well, it's only mind over matter until you actually have something wrong with you.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, you know what? Shoot, I've tried everything else. Why the heck not?
Right.
And so I tried it. And I was in tears because it was the first time in 11 years I had been pain-free.
Wow. Now, can I ask about that first experience and who was involved with that? Are you willing to share that? Were you hanging out with friends and the bong was being passed around? Was there, or was it tinctures and you went to a medical doctor and they put you on a specific cultivar, if you will?
So I'm outing myself a little bit here.
Come out of the cannabis closet. We all have, you know,
I'm outing myself a little bit here because I was living in Georgia at the time.
Uh-oh, that was illegal then, wasn't it? Ooh.
It's still illegal now.
You're right, but at least the state turned colors this year. Okay.
Yeah, and realistically, in Atlanta, where I'm from, they have decriminalized it. They had not at that time.
Gotcha. Okay. So
but this is the thing, Georgia, like I love my people. All right. We smoke weed.
Okay.
We smoke weed. Like if you went to the University of Georgia and you spent any time with frat house, and I'm sorry, but that's like everybody, you smoked weed. You did it. So it's something that's accepted in private practice. I mean, like this is, you know, actually, you know, Georgia is a pretty normal place. It's not what people expect. We're very friendly. We're not typically up in one another's faces. Like it's a very, you know, your religion, your politics, all of that stuff, that's private. It's up to you what you believe. It's up to you what you want to feel there. And we're not, and you know, also things that you do between consenting adults, you know, things that you do in private, things that don't cause harm, where it's no harm, no foul.
Right.
You know, most Georgians are kind of like, it's not my business, man. It's not my business. It's between you and whoever your, whatever your personal ethic is about that. It's not about that. We're not,
David, just like living in
law.
Cambridge, just like living in Cambridge in Massachusetts, right? No. We like to get in people's businesses up here and we have comments on everybody's business.
Well, discussion's an important part of it as well. And, one of the things that I think could move the needle a lot more in Georgia is actually if we did kind of discuss these things and talk about our concerns and kind of address those things. I mean, there's opportunity for discussion and frankly, the discussion's more appropriately done amongst the citizenry than I think our elected officials in that state. That state.
And I'll tell you, it's the elected officials thing that I have the biggest concerns about, because I really don't. I'd like to think, and David and I have done a few shows about New Jersey now, and they continue. The voters have voted. They want the adult use. They want regulations. They want dispensaries to open, and they just keep getting pushback and delay after delay after delay.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what's going to happen in New Jersey, but it's educating the legislators. It's really getting an opportunity to sit down with the elected officials and let them listen to open discussions and again
and patient discussions.
Right.
They need to see the good side because, of course, unfortunately, because of prohibition, and also because of Hollywood, because these make for wonderful stories. I mean, one of my favorite TV shows is Narcos, and that's based on the cartel discussions. And it's, these are wonderful dramatizations that are very, very fun to watch. But that doesn't tell you what the impact actually is on the ground level for having these prohibitions. And it gives you a snapshot of one side of it. And, frankly, that's not what they need to be. They need to hear about how this is impacting their citizens.
So,
right.
Narco, that's on rerun now, right?
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Okay.
They've got a number of, there's Narcos Mexico. There was also a really wonderful one that was on Escobar, and it was like a Mexican soap opera, but it's very funny also to see the difference between the American cultural take on Escobar, something that would portray him here as this, dippy little villain versus what he looks like in a Mexican soap opera, which is oh, he's a folk hero. He's a folk hero in Mexico. And it's what? But it's just really funny to see that cross-border cultural. It's very interesting.
That's because when he's bringing the money, he's taking the money out of
That's
the
right.
He brings it in down there and he spreads it around and he helps poor communities. He becomes a hero, right?
That's right.
It's all perspective. It's everybody's favorite radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? If you're stealing from me, you're a bad guy. But if you're stealing for me, you're my friend.
Right.
Right. And we could have avoided all of these things if we just didn't have prohibition.
Yep.
Right. Oh God, I was railing about that today with somebody. In fact, I talked to a gentleman today with a really cool product. I'm just going to tease it though, but it has to do with veterans and an opportunity for veterans to get involved with a grow your own supply and basically you own this 10 by 10 plot and it serves for you and it's owned by veterans. It's quite a couple of weeks, David. We've got our veteran show, right? 2 weeks from today.
Yes, but Jimmy, I want to ask Ashley a couple of questions because if I don't grab these questions in the feed, I think some people are going to be upset. So just to confirm, you're generally product agnostic, right? You don't mind whether it's THC, CBD, or something else. Yours is a platform, correct?
That's correct. So we have to do different amounts of regulatory reporting and different types of things on the back end. But we work with cannabis. We also can work with hemp. We can also work with anything else. Okay. It's just a matter of making sure that on the intake, we're getting the right information so that we are actually taking care of our obligations to the industry and to the financial industry.
So we're going to see if James throws another question on the YouTube thread. And then the other. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
No, I'm looking at the YouTube stream too, and on my iPad, and I just can't get the damn chat. So I'm reliant on you.
If somebody is a retailer, Ashley, and they're just enthralled with what they've heard today, and they want to sign up, what are the costs for a retailer to get onto your platform?
Okay, so the maximum rate that we charge on an ongoing basis is 3%. That's the maximum rate.
Right.
But depending on your organization, for example, if you came through social equity, if you came through economic empowerment, if you're part of those programs, we have special rates for you. The other thing is we actually have a special for your first year with us. That's a special rate as well. And that's for everybody.
And are there sign-up fees or initiation fees or upfront money?
Nope.
Okay,
No equipment to buy, no. And actually, for merchant processing, we don't have account fees.
Okay, so let me ask this question again for Kirk Bond. So are there sign-up fees or upfront monies or anything like that?
No.
Okay, Kirk, you heard that. His concern on the thread was, is there a minimum fee? One merchant told me $1,000. So there's no fee
No.
to sign up.
Who told you that? We've never told anybody that.
I don't think he was talking about Artery Pay. I mean,
Oh, okay.
looking to up his game to get into a better platform. That's Ashley. We've had you on a couple of times, and that's why it's a great. We believe it's a great platform. But I wanted to make sure we got 2 or 3 people in the thread who've been throwing questions in.
Yeah, please.
Yep.
There you go. So that's what David's here for anyway. That's good.
My
Thank
job
you.
is just to watch the thread. Jimmy asks the good questions.
No, I did.
Yeah. And if y'all are looking to reach us also, arterypay.com. And we're going to have videos up there that are actually going to show exactly how easy these things are for your consumers. Now, I am going to say we're a financial institution, and by law, we have to do enhanced Know Your Customer, which means that we are going to give you a business colonoscopy.
I don't think that's going to be terribly difficult, Ashley, because anybody who wants to get a bank account, who's going to be honest about it, has to go through that process, right?
They do. They do. It's not a different process than what you've gone through for banking.
Right.
So if you did it once, I expect that you'll probably already have your materials ready to go.
Yeah, it's basically the Cole memo laid out into an application.
That's part of it, yes.
There you
That's
go.
part of it.
I like that analogy, and it's better than the colonoscopy analogy. I can tell you that
Oh,
right now.
you don't like that?
Oh, sure. Every 5 years, it's something I look forward. You know what? I can't even remember what happens. It's like you're down, you're up,
You're
you're
not
gone.
watching the camera? The camera
No,
feed?
no. I try to avoid that. Thank you very much. Yeah, in high def, no, I don't need to go there. I don't want anybody to go there, actually, or to get right down.
Yeah.
Hey, Ashley, David, you got any more chats you want to throw out there? Any other
I
questions?
think that's it. If anybody's got a question, toss it in because we're going to be wrapping up in a few moments. We got a great guest here.
We have a great guest now. We don't have any more coming in. I'm going to tell you that. All right, because I was about to wrap it up early because we've got a We Talk News that's following this. And last week we had our most viewed news program released. We had over 7,000 views of our news show, which is
awesome.
Great. Yeah, and this week we cut another one, and again, I never know. I try to do the same show every time I go out there. My co-anchor, Ry Russell, and I are starting to gain a little bit more chemistry, more comfort going back and forth. And it is kind of a dog and pony show sometimes. I get that. And this week's is a good one. And we do run it right after this live stream show. So all you got to do is stay tuned and We Talk News comes up. And all I can say is stay to the end because I actually plug a webinar that David Rabinovitz and myself were part of that's being released next week, homegrownsummit.com. And David and I are doing the history of cannabis in America, which I find, it's kind of a fascinating thing for me because I'm a history major. And we came up with some really interesting anecdotes, different stories. David, I think did you enjoy that, David, that little exercise we did with Earl?
Great, yep.
Try to control your enthusiasm for it, though.
It was a wonderful time, Jimmy. I enjoyed doing it with you. It was almost as much fun as if I was hanging out with Ashley.
Aww, the feeling's mutual.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, guys, as always, Ashley, great to see your smiling face whenever. Good luck in Oklahoma. We look forward to seeing the Artery Pay growth happen. And, you're always welcome on any of our programs and productions. So you keep that up, please. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you, Jimmy and Dave, for having me on again. I, as always, really enjoyed it.
And it looks like you have a lot of things planned in Oklahoma tonight. Looks like a real wild time, right? I'm sure you have all sorts of parties to go to and
Yeah, I'm gonna go outside and just roll around in the snow.
There you go.
It's a little quiet. They've been closed down, bless their hearts, because of all of the weather coming through. It's been cold, but it's a beautiful city.
We are right in the middle of winter right now, and the Northeast, it comes in from the Pacific West, it dips down, and then it comes back up the Northeast, and that's our little weather 101. So anyway, I want everybody to stay tuned for Weed Talk News, but for now, I'm going to say goodbye, and remember, once again, you're watching The Green Rush. We're back here next Friday. David, do you know what we got coming in here next Friday? You ready to tease that yet or not? You want to leave that out?
I'm going to tease what it's about. Next Friday, we're going to talk about the economics of cultivation. So if you're like many of the people who believe in the romance of growing the plant on a commercial scale, but you're having trouble understanding how to get the numbers and how to put it all together, we're going to have people who are going to come in and walk through what it really takes to grow on a commercial level, and help you understand what are the cost components that you need to think about. So that's going to be a great show.
It definitely will be. And I've actually got a few additions to that lineup too, David, that I won't share now, but I will share with you after the show. I think you'll be excited to hear about some of the contacts I made and who's going to join us. So for Ashley Elsner from Artery Pay, David Rabinovitz from MassCan, and from Canaventure, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Special thanks from everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, including our video director, Dan French. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Coming up on Weed Talk News, 61% of Americans want cannabis reform now. Minimum wage and other policy initiatives can wait. California allows delivery drivers to cut in on the vaccination line, while many other states fight the ballot box questions. And sex and weed on Valentine's Day. All that and more on Weed Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Rye Russell, your main man from Weed Buds Radio.
Every week, Rye and I get together to report and comment on the news in the growing cannabis industry. And it seems every week, Rye, the news grows as fast as this weed itself.
It's been a busy week in the States and at the federal level.
That's right, Rye. And all eyes are on the nation's capital as they continue to prepare for cannabis reform in 2021. This week, there were more developments under the new administration of President Joe Biden. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer held his first meeting with cannabis advocates and lobbyists, and it is really the first step towards a reform bill. Meanwhile, there were representatives from the NCIA, the Marijuana Policy Project, NORML, the Drug Policy Alliance, and Students for Sensible Drug Policy, among others. And every one of them had their chance to chime in on what they would like to see in cannabis reform legislation. Now, sources in that meeting shared that at a minimum, they hope the bill will deschedule cannabis and introduce a regulatory system that is equity focused. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker will likely be the lead sponsor of that bill. And tomorrow on Green Rush Live at 4 on our PCM social media network, we'll have Michael Correia from the NCIA to give us the latest on that effort. Now, Rye, if I was polling you about what issue is the most popular among people in the United States, of course, outside of COVID relief and the vaccination rollout program, would it be, I'm going to give you multiple choice. This is like it's like a quiz. And this poll coming up is by Emerson College, by the way. So choice A, the proposed $15 minimum wage. B, citizenship for undocumented immigrants. C, rejoining the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Or legalizing cannabis. Which one is the big winner in importance, Rye, and why?
Ooh, Jimmy, I will never tell anybody what should be important to them, and that's why I try to read the news and not make it. But I'm going to take a wild guess. I think it's cannabis.
Yes, You are correct, Mr. Weedbud's radio guy, Ry Russell. In fact, according to this Emerson College poll, legalization of cannabis is the most popular reform initiative in Congress, with 61% of the 1,429 adults polled. By the way, those people thought it was even more important than all those ideas and even more important than the performance of the new president, Joe Biden, so far. So there you go.
Well, Jimmy, did you know there was a Super Bowl this weekend?
I heard about it, and some guy, TB Brady, he did pretty well, that Brady guy, didn't he?
I think our friend Tom Brady has picked up his 7th Super Bowl ring, and we have a new weed endorsement coming just a few days after the big game from a former NFL Super Bowl champion, Marshawn Lynch. Jimmy, you know Marshawn.
Marshawn Lynch is a former Super Bowl champion, but he's also a Super Bowl loser, courtesy of Dante Hightower, who tackled him in the backfield that set up that Malcolm Butler interception a few years ago. I'm sure you remember that one.
We absolutely do. Well, Marshawn Lynch has announced a new premium product line. Dobie blunts, some products are even infused with, this is funny, Jimmy, some of these products are infused with THCA diamonds. However, some major network subsidiaries reported that products are containing real 24-karat diamonds.
Oops. I think that was an oops, right?
I think so. But Marshawn is not the only NFL player involved with cannabis these days. Nope. Other former NFL stars that have entered the cannabis space include Ricky Williams, Tiki Barber, Eugene Monroe, Joe Montana, and even Marvin Washington.
I got one more for you. Leonard Marshall, the old Giants guy, is involved with a CBD company too. So I thought I'd sneak that in for you.
Well, fantastic. And I think the Gronk is also getting in on CBD. So there's going to be more players, I think, entering the cannabis space.
Indeed.
Jimmy, let's hear from Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report.
Thanks, guys. Canopy Growth announced its third quarter fiscal 2021 results with net revenue of $153 million. That was an increase of 23% over last year. Now, despite this increase in revenue, the company also recorded an eye-popping net loss of $829 million. They blame the loss on impairment and restructuring charges and other related charges of $416 million. Zigzag maker Turning Point Brands reported its fourth quarter net sales increased 31% to $105 million, and the net income increased to $12.7 million. Turning Point beat analysts' expectations for the quarter. Now, for the full year, net sales increased 11% to $405 million, and the net income increased to $33 million. Columbia Cares entered into an agreement with Canaccord Genuity for 2.8 million common shares. They're going to sell those at a price of 9 Canadian dollars per share, and it's going to get them about 25 million Canadian dollars. It's expected that this offering is going to be primarily sold to one large institutional investor. And that's the big news this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
And let's head over to our cross-country state roundup, because there's so much going on from coast to coast. Let's start on the West Coast, California. And what seems to be a major blow to cannabis advertising, California has overturned regulations allowing for cannabis billboards. Originally, the only restriction was you cannot advertise on the interstate within 15 miles of a state border. Now, you cannot advertise on an interstate that crosses state lines at all. And in Connecticut's governor has now introduced his own proposal and what the state's marijuana legalization should look like. Though it is a step in the right direction for social equity, some advocates are concerned that there's a lack of specifics. And again, in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo and state Democrats are still butting heads on how to introduce legalization for adult use marijuana. While Cuomo has once again introduced his own proposal, other lawmakers are criticizing him for not going far enough to remove criminal penalties for marijuana-related offenses and address the harms that prohibition has caused to communities of color. And in Minnesota, while recreational marijuana legalization looks like it's off the table this year, a new bill has been introduced that would help support legalization by making it easier for social equity applicants to receive licenses. So, Jimmy, before we head to Idaho, it seems like this is a theme that is tying up a lot of legislation across the states. So this might be leaning to where the federal legalization could help with some consistency in one of these problems.
I think the states are looking for federal direction on this, Rye. What bothers me is that the voters go to the ballot box, they pass questions that pave the way for adult use or a medical marijuana program in those states. And now politicians are getting involved and they're challenging what was really a democratic moment. I don't get it. Where's the will of the people here?
Well, just wait. Because let me tell you about Idaho and South Dakota.
Yeah.
So in Idaho, recently the Idaho Senate passed a ban by amending the state's constitution to prevent the legalization of marijuana as well as other drugs not approved by the federal government. But in South Dakota, when it comes time to show up, 54% of South Dakota's voters voted in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana use, only to have a circuit judge appointed by the state's governor reject the change, arguing it would have far-reaching effects on nature. We'll see what happens, since advocates of the South Dakota Adult Use Initiative will definitely be appealing that decision.
Absolutely. That's just crazy. That really bothers me on so many fronts, specifically as a member of the United States of America, a democratic society, right? Will of the people. Politicians are supposed to do what they are elected to do is represent those people. It's just not happening when it doesn't fit their own agenda. And that bothers me.
Well, Jimmy, they also have budgets. So in Wisconsin, the governor of Wisconsin has now included regulating and taxing marijuana in the state's 2021-2023 budget. So besides this, he thinks that they estimate legalizing would bring over $165 million to the state, which we know would be quite an advantage for a state like Wisconsin. But Jimmy, let's close off this coast-to-coast roundup with my home state of Maine. According to the Maine Office of Marijuana Policy, nearly 45 active licenses have been given to growers, manufacturers, testing sites, and retail stores across the state. Demand is too high, and the supply chain just cannot keep up.
Doesn't surprise me. And I bet you could have predicted that in a state like Maine, because they took them so long just to get it going. They expected to run out of weed up there, and I guess now they have.
Yes, I think, well, and Jimmy, we talked about this last year. I hate to say I told you so, but we also need more testing labs. All of this is going to slow us down.
That's what happens. Well, I will say this about the way of life in Maine. It's pretty slow anyway, isn't it, Ryan?
It's the way life should be.
That's right. You bet. All right. Now, any more stories from the state of Maine?
That's it. That closes our week.
All right. So remember the vape crisis of 2019? Leafly did a great job of identifying the challenges and the cause of that crisis. Now, that report helped get vitamin E acetate banned from concentrates. And of course, it also spotlighted the dangers of the illegal market. Now, Leafly has unveiled another issue with vaping of cannabis concentrates, and it has to do with testing. They looked at all 15 legal states to see if any state upgraded their testing requirements to what is required of vape cartridges in Canada and in Europe. None had. David Downs of Leafly is the author of that 3-part series that's available on leafly.com. And he and I talked on Thursday for next week's In the Weeds podcast. One test that was never used in the States is a test of the actual vapor. It's called emissions testing, something they already test for in Europe and in Canada.
And one of the things that jumped out right at the top was Colorado is going to start testing the emissions that come out of a vapor pen in not this year, but January 1st, 2022. They're going to be looking for heavy metals. Experts say they're going to find toxins around concentrations of certainly high terpenes. But you talk to the experts and they go, yeah, emissions testing is table stakes for getting a nicotine vapor product on the market in Europe or Canada. You can't even ship them, which fits into a broader picture of like tougher regulations in places like Canada or Europe.
The entirety of that interview with David Downs on In the Weeds next week. So, Rye, we've got an interesting breaking news story from California. The state board there has decided that cannabis delivery drivers can get vaccinated before teachers in that state. Now, the reasoning is that the drivers are delivering essential medicine during this pandemic. So now I have a question for you, Rye, and our audience. I'm a lot closer to the age of 75 than you are, in Maine, of course. Now, in Massachusetts, another legal state, here in the Bay State, there are certain conditions that must be met in order to jump up in priority for vaccinations for COVID-19. Do you have that system of not seniority, but like availability and eligibility in Maine?
Well, I have no idea what we're doing for a rollout here in Maine, Jimmy, but I promise if they bump me up, I'm going to save it for you.
Well, I appreciate that since I am closer to that 75. But smoking is listed as one of the conditions that can actually help you move up in priority. And now what I really want to know is, has anybody heard if they will cover smoking of cannabis to bump you ahead in that line? Because that is certainly one of the things that, smoking is smoking, not tobacco cigarette smoking, but rather cannabis smoking. Do you think that is the same exception? So, Rye, do you think if you're a cannabis smoker, you should be able to have an opportunity to cut in line? And by the way, it's like phase 3, group 2. So it's not like it's, next in line, and it's not, healthcare workers. It's people who are users of this and they inject this as a medicine. What do you think of that?
I think it's really tough, Jimmy. Honestly, for me, I have some family members that I love that I will absolutely fight for getting the vaccine before somebody like myself. So I think it's tough. I think everybody has a stance on the vaccine, but I do think that those of us that are willing and able should allow other individuals to take priority.
So I'd like to know, I'm going to ask our audience here, that if anyone knows if smoking cannabis does allow you to claim that as a medical condition, counting to either the 1 or the 2 types of medical conditions that can move you up the ladder for access to this vaccination. And you can contact us at info@procannabismedia.com. In the meantime, let's go north of the border to Solomon Israel from NJ Biz Daily's International Bureau with the Canadian Cannabis Report. Solomon?
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canopy Growth has posted a third quarter net loss of 830 million Canadian dollars. Some of that loss was attributed to recent cultivation facility closures. Canopy said it's aiming for positive adjusted EBITDA in its next fiscal year. In the meantime, the company said it's optimistic about entering the US THC market this calendar year. And Canadian cannabis regulator Health Canada has not issued a single fine to a Canadian cannabis company since recreational legalization in 2018, Marijuana Business Daily has learned. The fines for violating federal cannabis law can go up to $1 million Canadian dollars. However, some companies caught breaking the rules have had their cannabis licenses suspended, preventing them from selling marijuana. You can read those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel for Marijuana Business Daily.
Here's this week's factoid, courtesy of MJ Biz Daily's Fact Book. Did you know that for every single dollar that is spent in the legal cannabis market, $2.50 gets injected into the economy? That fact and more available in the MJ Biz Daily Fact Book, available on their website, mjbizdaily.com. Hey, Rye, did you happen to see the article in Forbes magazine this week when they interviewed Bo Wrigley, the CEO of Parallel, a multi-state cannabis operator with 42 dispensaries across 3 states? Did you see that interview?
I don't know that anybody would believe me, because he predicted that his cannabis operation will be worth more than his family's chewing gum business. And he sold that for $23 billion in 2008.
That's Absolutely correct, Rye. In fact, Parallel has invested heavily in research and development in cannabis, and Bo talked about CBN. Another one of those magical cannabinoids is an ambient killer since it helps with sleep. Bo Wrigley said that cannabinoids have the potential to improve quality of life through pain reduction, anxiety reduction, and of course, improved sleep. So, Rye, is there room for MSOs, multi-state operators, and local mom and pop dispensaries in this growing business? Or are they always going to be at odds with each other?
You know me, I think there's a place for everyone in this world and in this industry. So I think there absolutely is a place for anybody that wants to participate in the cannabis industry.
Well, and now it's time to go to Washington, D.C. with Vote Pro podcast, Phil Adams for the D.C. Report. Phil?
Hi, this is Phil Adams from Vote Pro podcast, here with the Weed Talk News D.C. Report. Well, Joe Biden and the Democrats aren't the only ones feeling the heat when it comes to cannabis polling. Members of the GOP Congressional Caucus are finding themselves on the wrong side of public opinion when it comes to cannabis legalization, or so says one Democratic legislator. Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden of Oregon told Yahoo Finance Live that his colleagues across the aisle are still trying to square their own anti-drug ideologies with rapidly evolving public opinion. Wyden said, quote, "My Republican colleagues are trying to reconcile some of the views they've long held with the fact that their voters are way out in front of them." Last November, all 5 state ballot initiatives calling for legalization of cannabis for medical and or adult use passed, most with strong bipartisan support. And a Morning Consult Politico survey taken last December found that 66% of voters, including 51% of Republicans, support a bill to federally legalize marijuana. Cannabis stocks surged last week in the wake of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's announced commitment to passing cannabis legalization. Advocates and investment experts caution, however, that getting such a bill through still involves clearing some high legislative hurdles. Many believe it will likely take 60 votes in the Senate to approve a measure to end the federal prohibition on marijuana. Passing more piecemeal reforms, however, such as cannabis banking legislation, is widely thought to be an easier lift. Michael Correia, lobbyist for the National Cannabis Industry Association, said that banking reform is, quote, teed up, and called it, quote, the easiest low-hanging fruit with the longest track record. GOP Congressman Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin, in remarks on the House floor last week, acknowledged that state-level cannabis legalization is reducing the illegal trafficking of cannabis from other countries, as more people have access to legal, regulated markets. A 2020 report from the Congressional Research Service lends credence to Grothman's assertion and predicts that the trend will likely continue. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
And finally, before I forget, there's another research study on the effects of cannabis on memory in aging patients. First, did you know that people in my age bracket of 60 to 64 have the highest rate of cannabis use, including a 9% increase since 2016? Now, a study in the Archives of Clinical Neuropsychology, I get that every month. I don't know about you, right? It finally concluded that the use of cannabis in older adults, yes, even older than me, has no major effect on cognitive function, I think, right? Your story next.
That's totally fair, Jimmy. And you know what? What's even funnier, I might not get that, but the asexual gets Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is right around the corner. And what better way to celebrate than with cannabis? For a long time, people have thought weed and love go hand in hand. And this weekend should be no different. So anyone looking for those last minute gifts, swing by the dispensary, whether it is for a smooth indica, THC massage oil, your partner should love it either way. Hey, Jimmy, what do you know about Valentine's Day?
Okay, it's a day for lovers. It's also a Hallmark holiday. It's a great time, though, to actually communicate with your partner. And did you know, here's a personal item. I know I rarely share personal things on these types of shows, but I actually got a C+ in my sex class in college. Now, I aced the lab, but I definitely failed the final. I admit that. I'm comfortable with that. One thing I did learn, that the brain is actually the sex organ. Think about that on Valentine's Day. Now, next week, there's a great series of free webinars being released as part of the homegrownsummit.com. The kickoff is February 15th, and Green Rush Live co-host David Rabinovitz and I go through the history of cannabis in the U.S. with Earl Carruthers. You can go to homegrownsummit.com for a free ticket and more information. That will do it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
I'm Rye Russell from Weed Buds Radio and your main man.
And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Pro Cannabis Media programming